We do all kinds of things here at Word in Your Ear.
We do podcasts.
We do video casts.
Quizzes.
Crowdcasts with famous authors.
And we can guarantee to make your next birthday one you will never forget.
There's only one way to make sure you get all of this, you get it in full, and you get it first.
And that's by becoming a supporter on Patreon.
Details here.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Well, we're delighted to be joined on what is our 100th Word in Your Attic. We worked it out. We thought we're going to have somebody really special. Who can we get? Let's try Midge Ure. And Midge, there you are in your newly converted home studio man cave. Is that fair to say?
It's reasonably fair to say. I have to say, first of all, I'm either incredibly honoured that I'm doing your 100th or absolutely insulted that I am your 100th. You are now literally scraping the bottom of the barrel. You've gone through the bottom of the barrel. So thank you, chaps.
Not remotely. It's lovely to see you. So that's great. And you're on the outskirts of Bath, and that's you have all sorts of camera equipment set up in that studio, I think you were saying.
Well, I have. I didn't used to have. I now need a bigger studio. It was fine for little me, my little man cave for making music. But when I got back from Australia last year, we were touring down there. We started hearing about the COVID thing in New Zealand. So we did New Zealand first. And the day we left New Zealand to fly to Australia to carry the tour on, New Zealand shut its gates. They closed down. They did the right thing.
Just after you'd gone. You should have stayed there.
Well, yes, they waited until I'd left to make sure they shut down, make sure I didn't come back. So we managed to get back from Australia and all of that stuff. You couldn't be any further away from home in the middle of a pandemic. And then I realised that, the 2 or 3 months shutdown that we were possibly looking at was probably going to go on quite a lot longer. So I kind of invested and started figuring out how to do little performances from here. So I did this. I got this,
Come on, demonstrate. That's terrific.
This little audiovisual mixer here, which is a 3-camera system. And you'll like my little tracking thing, because it kind of, when I've seen lots of people doing stuff from home in front of the cameras, and it's fine. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. But I wanted to do something that looked and sounded better. Yeah. So I invested in all of this. So I can now got this little. So when I'm sitting chatting to you guys, it looks like I've got an entire film crew.
Oh, it does. It does. Slow panning shot.
One-man setup. Look, as I've got all this stuff going on, split screens, and there I go. Get in the right position.
So how many cameras have you got there, Mitch?
I've got 3 cameras there.
Right.
So I did a lot of research. I did an awful lot of YouTube research, seeing all these lads with their hats on backwards, all talking about vlogging and blogging. Good.
Then you just ordered it and waited less than 24 hours to have it all come up the garden path, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it all came here. It took 24 hours to get it all, and then about a month and a half to figure out how to plug it together. It's slightly different from making music. I mean, the technical aspects of it all are, doing webcasts and stuff. It was a bit of a mess to start with, but I kind of got there, and now I'm loving it. It's great. I can keep in contact with the rest of the world here, and do radio and do television interviews and whatever, all from here, and it's all good quality.
Right.
So you were meant to be touring, weren't you? Was it last year? You had a tour booked, and you're touring again, I think, this year, May.
It's supposed to be me. Well, again,
will that happen? I suppose it might. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. The COVID goalposts keep moving, don't they? Yeah. So it's kind of difficult. We're trying to be realistic about it. I think, we're humans, and we need that, interconnection. We need to be in the same room now and again. We're all missing hugs and cuddles and handshakes and stuff. Yeah. And being in a room with a lot of noise battering you. That's what we've grown up with, and to have that taken away from us has been kind of hard, not just for the artists, but for fans, for music consumers. Yeah. We all need to go and see stuff. And I tried to slip in a couple of smaller acoustic things prior to Christmas last year, and it just went. It was just when we went back into lockdown, a worse lockdown than the first one.
Yeah.
So we just launched. I mean, we've got stuff in the books for this year, but I keep hearing different things. I just heard on the news this morning that the Scots government are talking about is probably October before the majority of the country will have their their jabs and stuff and then be allowed out. So anything this year, I don't know. It's a wing and a prayer. So we've just announced a tour for 2022, which sounds ludicrous. It's 12 months away, but that's the reality of the situation. See, there's a reason you guys will see this as well, because you're quite astute chappies. The day after Christmas, our televisions are absolutely inundated with adverts for holidays. And it's because the human psyche is that we have to have something on the horizon to look forward to. So we've spent 6 months building up to Christmas, and then it's gone like a bubble bursting.
Yeah.
And then you need something the next day to go, right, I'm going to book something for 8 months down the road. And we all need that in the horizon.
Absolutely. So have you had a chance to go back and listen to any of your old records and dig out any stuff from the loft, as it were?
Well, I tried. I tried to find a very interesting guitar for you, but there's lots of guitars up there, and I couldn't find it. And I'm hoping it's still there because it means something to me. I've dug a few things out. They're not necessarily the best pieces of memorabilia. I don't really keep memorabilia. I've got a couple of things in storage, like the coat that I wore at Live Aid.
It's in storage.
It's in, well, because now you like this.
Go on, what are those?
In Scotland, they did in Edinburgh. They did a kind of pop memorabilia thing at the Museum for Scotland, and they asked various Scots artists, all across the musical board, to present something that meant something. So they had my coat from Live Aid, my classic Burberry from the Vienna video, the guitar that I used at Live Aid, the kind of grey thing, and a few bits and pieces.
I can still remember that coat. It was a kind of belted grey mackintosh, I think, wasn't it?
It was a kind of. It was Humphrey Bogart fawn.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was beige.
It was beige, that's right. It was Bogart,
So I mean, I've got those things, but they're kind of in storage because they when they came to get them, which is great, you love this, they came to get them and they had them shipped and moved, driven up to Edinburgh, these things. And the people who handled these clothes with like white linen gloves. And they're the same people who handles like Mary Queen of Scots dresses.
Yes.
so it was handled with great reverence. Whereas I just pulled it out the loft in a plastic bag.
So that's the same Mackintosh. Mark and I were just talking about this before you came on. When you're on the cover of Smash Hits on your own, you wore that Mackintosh. I think I'm right in saying you must have done.
I did.
You had the Clark Gable moustache. I remember it vividly. Yeah.
Yes, I know. What an old tart. Yes, because the thing is that the first time I made any money at all, years and years and years of touring the circuit around in Scotland and just about surviving and scraping enough to pay for your Marshall amplifier or whatever on HP. The first time I actually generated any income was from the same thing. It was from the Vienna album when after its success, and the first Visage album, I suppose, royalties came in, and the first thing I bought was that Mackintosh. I bought that coat.
Very Scottish, Midge.
It was practical. It was sensible. So I bought that coat. So that was my daily coat. And then, of course, you wear it in a video, and all of a sudden it becomes someone else's.
Legendary.
It's a legendary coat, and I couldn't wear it anywhere. So
it's funny. We did the last one of these we did was with Bernard Doherty, who you'll know, and Bernard pointed out to me afterwards, and Mark pointed out as well, that on Antiques Roadshow last week, I don't know if you saw it.
I did, yeah.
Somebody was selling the background that I was in front of at Live Aid. Somebody
it was only valued at that because it was the guy doing the catering, and he'd found it in a skip and thought, "I'll have that. I'll go home on the bus with that under my arm,j
But it was only valued at that much because David wasn't in front of it.
Of course.
15 grand. Yeah. Well. So actually, I wanted to ask you this because Mark and I were talking about this. I saw a clip of you on YouTube or Twitter recently talking about the difficulties the likely difficulties of touring Europe post Brexit, carnets and all that stuff. And we're going, Midge is not old enough to remember the days of carnets and kind of.
I know you would have been. This is because you joined the union in '73, so you would have been what, 19, 18 when you were touring Europe?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
I've been doing this for a while, chaps.
Yeah.
I left my engineering apprenticeship when I was 18. Although I'd been playing in bands all the way through, I left to join my first full-time band when I was 18. So 72 was when I joined, which was a great year for music, which I'm sure no doubt we'll get on to later. But yeah, I was there, and the band used to go off to Finland and Germany and do all of that stuff. But yeah, I remember carnets. I remember the process of getting stopped at the border. I remember driving through right through Eastern Germany from the west right through the east to get to Berlin.
Berlin. Cool.
And they used to give you at the border as you entered the east. They used to give you 5 hours, I think it was, to get there. They would take you out, look at your passports, and take your number plate, and then say, right, on you go. And you had 5 hours to get to Berlin. If you didn't get there, they came looking for you. So I do remember all that stuff.
Woe betide you if you get a puncture on that motorway.
And that was what motorway? It was, it was a pothole filled, A road, a B road.
So you do remember those days? No, I was thinking the word carnet. And I was never a tour manager or anything like that, but it sent a shiver up my spine
completely.
Because anybody who had to deal with that stuff, it was a nightmare.
Every drumstick had to be accounted for, every amplifier and all that.
Yeah. Well, in those days, we were traveling in a glorified transit van or something, not even glorified, just a crappy transit van. So there wasn't an awful lot of equipment to plow through. But can you imagine what it's going to be like for a big touring party with 20 Arctics? And some guys sitting there with this massive list going, I want to see this case and that case and this case. And they have to pull it all out at every border. So it's a bit of a logistical nightmare. It's a classic example of us Brits shooting ourselves in the foot with one of the few remaining industries that we're actually quite good at.
Yeah, absolutely.
We managed to get rid of everything else, shipbuilding and steelworks and car and motorcycle manufacturing and all of that stuff. We managed to throw all that away. And now we throw this away. So it's crazy.
Are you formally involved in the campaigns to get this looked into, changed or whatever, or just informally?
I'm not really formally involved in anything. Okay. I've got a big mouth, I suppose, and an opinion. And I was partly responsible for getting the letter together that went in the Times. That we managed to get it in the front page for some reason, which was great. But it's a fine line. You've got to tread very carefully that you're not just some rock star, moaning about not making as much money as you did last week or last year or, last decade. Because it's not just about us. It's about the arts. It's about everything. It's about the exports. One of the few things you can travel anywhere on the planet. In fact, there's probably two things. If you find yourself in the middle of Africa with Save the Children or whatever, somebody will come up to you when they see you and say, Manchester United. So that's football's huge, but so's music, British music. You travel anywhere on the planet, and there it is. It's just it's coming at you.
Yeah. So, what have you got anything there to show us that you've managed to scare up?
I've managed
to. What have we got?
Some absolute crap.
Perfect.
See,
that's our currency.
This is. See, I mean, it's funny when you're doing interviews. People ask you, highlights of your life, and and they all tend to think, they all jump on, Live Aid or Band Aid or any of that stuff, because that's what's in the the public eye. That's what they remember. So, but it's the weird things. So I'm going to try and switch cameras here because this one.
This is so.
We've never
so
had
impressive.
We're so impressive.
I'm semi-pro. What can I tell you? Right. So, look.
That's wonderful.
Right. Do you see that?
Yeah,
all right.
We do.
Brandon, you're still clinging to a knighthood dream. No, this is from Viz. Right. So this is the ultimate accolade. This having a whole page of Viz, speculating about me sewing my name inside my school blazer and writing "Sir" in front of it.
When did they do that? How old is that?
Oh, I have no idea. It's quite old, obviously. I'm not even sure Viz still...
Well, they're still going, Viz.
Right,
still very much so.
Oh,
yeah.
Going. Very definitely.
And I'm still clinging to my knighthood dream. So you could probably reprint this and nobody'd know, you know. So that's my first one.
That's
brilliant.
brilliant.
Another one?
Have you got any of the old singles you bought or anything like that?
Hang on a second. Have you got any honours, Midge? Did you get any honours? Have you got any honours?
Yeah, I've got an OBE. Yeah.
You got an OBE?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you got that with you? We haven't had an OBE word in your head.
I hadn't even thought of that. It sounds like showing off.
I hadn't thought of
that. I got a cupboard full of this stuff.
Yeah, I have to go to my honours room.
Oh, right. So you got an OBE. Well, that's pretty good. You get, you get a badge, presumably, do you?
You get a little cross, and
you go to the palace. Who did you get to? Who bestowed the OBE?
The Queen.
Fantastic.
Oh, well,
when you remember the conversation? This is brilliant.
I do remember the conversation. I had a kilt made specially for it, not in my tartan, but I'd seen an all black kilt, but it's a black tartan with black everything, so it's different shades of black. And I went to the palace, and you're only allowed, I think it's 3 guests. So I had a bit of a problem because I've got 4 daughters. So we kind of drew straws. And we had to bribe one of the daughters that if she didn't get into the palace, they could sit in the car in the grounds of the palace. So they got in the gates, but you weren't allowed into the actual ceremony. So we had to bribe one of them with going into Hamleys afterwards and spending 50 quid on her. so she wouldn't moan about not got. She wasn't bothered. She was too young. And anyway, so we got in and. You like this as well. You're kind of lined up with everyone else who's getting their honours, and a luminary comes round, Lord somebody or other, whatever, comes round and tells you what you've got to say to the Queen and how to react, and don't grab her hand like Trump or whatever. Like
don't prolong the conversation, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Right, Smile and nod, and I'm standing in line thinking, well, this is, it's pomp and circumstances. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. There's a huge room. And there's a galleried landing at the far end with a military band playing. And I'm standing just outside the door in this line, just waiting for my turn. And you couldn't really hear what the band were doing. But as I got closer to it, the band sounded worse and worse and worse. And then when I got to walk up, I'm thinking, well, they're going to play some fantastic, piece of, wonderful classical music or something. They were playing Food, Glorious Food.
Oh, God.
As I walked up to get my honour. And the Queen was lovely. And I can't she must have had an earpiece or something, because she obviously hasn't got a clue who I am. But she asked the relevant questions. She said the whole thing about, you realise I had to, cancel my garden party because of, your things. But she was doing it with a smile. It was really nice. And, it was, and how's the charity going? It was, then she could probably ask anyone that, Yeah. And how's your charity going?
Did she ask you about early Visage singles or rich kids or anything? Or
yeah, so
what was it like working with Rusty Egan?
What was Steve Strange like? Yeah.
Yeah.
He stole my style.
Oh God, that's fantastic!
That's such a good story. Oh, wonderful.
What else you got there?
Again, equally full of reverence. And I think again, it's a regular public misconception that you go to a musician's house and it's full of rock memorabilia and guitars everywhere. My guitars are here, but this isn't in the house. And if you walked into a house blind, not knowing whose it was, you'd instantly be able to tell it's a musician's, because there'd be a Wurlitzer in the corner, and there'd be a wealth of albums like David's got there. And it's not true in my house. You wouldn't be able to tell that because I don't have any of that stuff. But I do have this, which I'm kind of very proud of. So if I hold this up, right. So you can see a friend of mine made this for me. And as you can tell by the little handwritten thing for my 60th birthday, and it's Vienna, as you can see.
Right.
But it's not, because if I go in closer,
I can't see. You're going to have to tell us.
What does it say? You have to read it to us.
It's actually a gold painted.
Shut up your face!
Shut up your face! Of course, which kept you off the coveted #1 spot.
This again. It's the great British misconception, because for 40 bloody years I have answered questions about this guy, never having met him, never really wanting to meet him. And because everybody on the planet seemed to be miffed by the fact that got to #1 and Vienna didn't. But everyone seems to forget that Ultravox were elevated instantly from playing, Ericsson Liverpool to playing, with all the toys and bells and whistles, going out and doing, it's a whole different thing. Everything changed because that record got to #2. And it's not a record that you would remotely associate with bothering the charts. Normally, it's too long, and it was electronic and speeds up and has a violin in it, and all of that. So the antithesis of what would be a hit record. And they all think that we're really miffed about the #1, but we were actually ecstatic.
Thrilled to
be.
#2.
Yeah, of course.
So I was just thinking. So what year are we talking about? Vienna. I'm very bad on years.
I think I joined the band.
81, though.
I joined the band 79. 81 was probably when it came out as a single.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's.
Yeah, 80 we recorded it, I think.
So it's 40 years ago. Yeah. So when it was selling, when I'm trying to recall those glory days when records went in the charts and they went in at #22, and then maybe you got on top of the pops and it went up to 12, and then it might go down and it might go up again. What was it selling every day during that period? Can you remember? People must have been telling you this.
Yeah, to paint the picture, I was living in a little flat in Chiswick, above an estate agent's, and I'd moved in, I don't know, 3 months prior to this coming out, and I didn't have a telephone. In those days, you had to, book a telephone, and it took 3 months or whatever to get a telephone.
Yeah.
I was reading that we were talking about this the other day.
Beatles,
when the Beatles moved to the first houses in mid-60s in London, it took 6 months to get a telephone, even if you're
Paul McCartney. OBE.
Well, it's true. So every day when the record started, started, because I think Vienna was the third single from the album. So when Vienna started happening, when it finally did get played on the radio and it seemed to grab people's imaginations, I used to have to get out and walk down to the telephone box at the end of Turnham Green Terrace in Chiswick and phone the office that morning to find out if I had any interviews or did they need me in for anything or whatever. And they would tell me the reorders, because first thing in the morning they'd sold a batch of records in the stores, and then they would they'd come in and reorder from the label. So you'd phone in the morning and you'd say, oh, by the way, you got 10,000 reorders last night, and you think, whoa, that's amazing. After about a week, you'd be phoning twice a day, 4 in the morning, and you'd hear about the 40,000 reorders, and then you'd phone in the evening, and then you'd hear that they were all gone. And then the next day it was another 50 or 60,000 real. It was ridiculous. I mean, the amount of records that were moving at the time. But that was when we didn't have, these things. We didn't have other forms of entertainment. Music was the be all and end all. We ate, slept, and breathed music.
But I love the idea of your phone box. You turn up on the phone box. Presumably, Richard Jobson will be in there one day ringing up Virgin, and then there'd be Kevin Rowland will be there.
So how's your record doing today, Richard? All right. Only 10,000, really?
It's a very smash hits fantasy.
That's a cartoon. That's a cartoon in smash hits.
Yeah, idea.
Oh God,
smash hits. That's this fantasy world that all pop stars kind of live together.
Yeah, like the Beatles.
About like one big house, like the Beatles.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Have you got any stuff from back in the Salvation days and all that kind of stuff? And
Nothing. I've got absolutely nothing. I've got photographs in places, but I am so disorganized. I don't know where anything is. I'm one of those guys that once you decide to move house after 10, 15 years, then you discover all the stuff that you'd forgotten you had.
Yeah.
So and the dreadful thing is that because I'm not very good at keeping tabs on this stuff, people ask for photographs for articles. They'll look for an old photograph, and then you never get it back. And I've kind of stopped doing it now. So I've got stuff from, I suppose, the Salvation days. The only real documentation I would have would be a couple of photographs. People, I suppose, with the advent of the internet, people find things. So they post. They post adverts from the Scottish newspapers, telling you what's coming or who's playing on the local, Clouds disco on a Saturday night, and there's your name next to Tear Gas, who were the Alex Harvey band. So basically they went on, and Alex Harvey just picked them up, and that was the band. So you saw what was kind of going on then, and people throw them back at you. And old photographs, you see things that you've never seen before in your life.
That's what I was saying. Presumably, you must find that people know more about what you've done than you remember.
Yes,
is that fair to say?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Because
it's
not. I don't have.
Do you have a scholar? Do you have a super fan who kind of, if you wanted to check what was the B-side of something, you could call him or her? No?
Yeah, I think there are a few people, and they're usually associated with the website or the fan club or whatever, and they know all the stuff, and I get it wrong all the time, and it's I make things up. Maybe it's an age thing, where you think I get dates completely wrong because I think everything happened like 5 years ago, and it's 45 years ago, whatever. So I'm no good at that stuff. So luckily there are people out there who take more interest in my career than I ever did.
Do you ever get people? I mean, even Mark and I get this just on the basis of whistle tests and things like that. People say, I was watching you interviewing so-and-so last night, and you think, I never met him in my life.
No memory of it whatsoever. And then they'll send you a little thing, and there you are with Fish from Marillion, and you don't even remember introducing him or whatever.
Absolutely.
And once you see it, you think, God, I remember that terrible shirt, and it all comes back to you,
Well, it happened to me the other day, weirdly. Someone tweeted, Midge was never a big fan. He wasn't always a big fan of Bono. And they quoted something from a Smash Hits or whatever, and I instantly said, "What absolute bollocks! It's a made-up quote." And then he posted the entire article. There it was, the full thing, and I went, okay,
Yeah.
All right.
Can you remember things like the first singles you bought or anything? You don't have to have copies of them, but can you remember the very early records that really, made a difference to you?
Yeah.
I'm trying not to say changed your life.
Well, they kind of did. I mean, I would get the violins out. I was born in a tenement slum in Glasgow, so we had no record player. I didn't get a record player. I don't remember seeing one in the house until I was, in double figures. It was 10, 11 or whatever, and but we had a radio. So the radio then, I suppose, was like the home station or the light program or whatever it was. And they played everything. So you get everything from Mantovani to Matt Monro to comedy records, and My Boomerang Won't Come Back or whatever it was, and then the odd pop song. And I remember, which I kind of shouldn't, I remember hearing Santo and Johnny's Sleepwalk, which is this beautifully haunting lap steel guitar thing, and that just resonated with me. I mean, it went in and didn't come back out again. And when I was old enough to save up pocket money and go down and buy a single, I think initially the only singles you could afford were the Embassy records, which you got from Woolworths, which were the cover versions of current hits. You could buy a single for, I don't know, 2 and 6 or something that had 2 hits on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at that age, you knew there was something weird about them, but you couldn't tell what, because you didn't know that they just got a session band in and re-recorded the hits of the day on Embassy Records. But the first proper record I distinctly remember saving up to buy was My Mind's Eye, The Small Faces.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay, God, it's a very sophisticated first record.
I was a huge Small Faces fan. Huge Small Faces fan. I loved the big guitars because they always the guitars that were way too big for them because
they were tiny guys, weren't they?
They were tiny guys, and that was another reason for me liking them. You know, I thought, yes, there's space in there for little guys. That's good.
Do you think rock and roll is a medium for little blokes? Because we do often think this. You don't find many tall rock stars, do you? Do you? Bob Geldof, I suppose, tall.
Brian May is pretty tall.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah,
but
maybe.
the Rolling Stones, you pop them in your top pocket.
Well, I suppose it's got a lot to do with, you know, maybe back in the 60s when rock stars were trying to be flamboyant. They could only fit in women's clothes. So you look at all the early Stones, you know, all of that stuff, you know, when it started getting a bit flowery and flower power in the 70s, 60s and 70s and things, they were all wearing like women's blouses tied in the middle and, you know, and you couldn't do that. You wouldn't get that, you know, 6'5" tall guy or whatever, you know, wearing women's clothes.
But also 6'5" tall guys don't necessarily have this urge to get any attention because they have, most people I know who are really tall have this sort of slightly apologetic thing about them, actually.
Well, they have
which is kind of like, sorry, you know.
They have the over 6 foot tall stoop. They do. Because they're used to talking down to people.
That's right.
Whereas, it's not like that if you're small.
I've got the 5'8" crick.
Have you seen? You must have seen that clip on YouTube. A wonderful clip of Small Faces doing Tin Soldier with P.P. Arnold, which I still think is the coolest looking group ever. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think I have.
They look absolutely beautiful. They're just at the zenith of their prettiness, you know.
Well, I had a ticket when I was in secondary school when I must have been, I don't know, 13 or 14. I had a ticket to see, now I'm probably going to end up making this up. I think it was like Amen Corner. I think it might have been Jimi Hendrix and the Small Faces, like one of those packages, one of the like 6 bands, 7 bands.
Yeah.
And I'd nobody to go with, and I had a big exam at school the next day, and I didn't go. So I missed the opportunity of seeing Hendrix and the Small Faces. But I used to go and see Humble Pie, and Marriott was just exceptional.
It was.
Pie.
I used to love
and then he put together the Small Faces again with a slightly different lineup. And I went to see that, and I left after 2 songs, and my heart was broken. I should never have gone to see it. You know, it wasn't the same thing. It was a whole different scenario.
Yeah.
But I was on a plane. This is my other little Marriott story. I was on a plane flying out to Los Angeles a few years back, quite a while back, to make a record out there. And Marriott was on the plane, and for some reason I was up the pointy end, which is very unusual, and he was up the back, and he spotted me as he went back, and he came up to me halfway through the flight and said, come back, no, have a chat. So I'm sitting chatting to my hero on the plane. In the days when they put a movie on, you know, on a transatlantic flight, you got 2 crappy movies on little screens that pop down from the middle of the aisle in the ceiling. And it's pitch black, and we're sitting chatting away, and he's telling me about his packet 3 and how he's making a bit of money for the first time in his life. And he was flying over to go and meet up with Frampton with a view to reforming Humble Pie. Wow. You know, and he said, I'm doing this. Have you heard this Frankie Miller song? And I said, no, I don't know it. And he said, it goes like, and he started singing this full, you know, massive voice.
And everyone's saying, we're trying to watch the movie. Yeah.
They're all pulling their little air, you know, things, they're pulling up, going, what the, you know. And it was on the flight on the way back that he died. So it was
really
a poignant, sad moment. And the really sad thing is, he said, "Here's my hotel. Give us a shout, and we'll go out and get dinner or something." And I never did it. Right. Which is really bad.
Right.
Oh, that's so sad.
You must have met many of your musical heroes.
Yeah,
surely.
Yeah, I've been lucky because everyone tells you, was it actors don't work with children or animals, and in music they say don't meet your heroes because they'll be complete dicks, and that wasn't the case. I sat with I sat with Clapton when my little house in Montserrat in the Caribbean still existed. He was out there.
Was that the one that was eaten by termites? No, it wasn't.
Yeah, a couple of times, yeah.
Yeah, it was. That's right. Didn't you buy a house and the whole thing was just completely demolished?
God's way of telling a boy from Cambuslang you shouldn't have a house in the Caribbean, eaten by termites, kind of demolished by Hurricane Hugo, rebuilt, and then the volcano erupted. Oh, yeah. So, but while it was still intact, Clapton was out working on Sting's album, and came and hung out down at the house. And he spotted the guitars, and we picked up 2 guitars, one acoustic, one electric, and we sat there playing these old blues things. And he kept saying to me, when it was my turn to play the electric, he kept saying, "I didn't know you could play guitar. How did you learn to play like that?" I said, "But listening to you, it's like copying you. That's what it was." So I've been incredibly lucky meeting the people that I've respected and admired, and because the majority of them all got into music because they respected and admired somebody else. They were fans of somebody else's music,
Do you, in your experience, do they ever, when they cluster together, for a jam or whatever, or you're sitting with Eric Clapton or you're making Band-Aid records or whatever, they're still quite competitive with each other, quietly?
You know what? Yeah, probably. You have to be a show off to want to do this. Just to want to stand on stage at any point, you have to be some form of show off. You want to show off your playing abilities, or your sucking your cheeks in, whatever it happens to be. So there is a competitive edge. But I didn't really see any of that in Band-Aid. I suppose that the only competitive thing was the battle between Spandau and Duran to get back from Germany to get to the toilets to put their makeup on first. Other than that, there wasn't any of that stuff. And any of the big kind of the things I've been musical director for, like the Princess Trust concerts and stuff, where you really are in amongst the elites, the big boys. I didn't really see any of that competitive. I saw a couple of bits of bad behaviour, but other than that, it's kind of
so true though, because Dave and I were both at the Band-Aid recording, covering it, and you did get the impression, because normally if you get a collection of rock stars in one place, there's a very tense moment when they kind of establish the pecking order. Who is the one that they should all be, kowtowing to.
Yeah, well, I think they were all scared of Bob, It was,
true. That's probably true.
It is true. They were scared of Bob and they didn't know the song. You have to remember that and back then you couldn't play the song to people. You couldn't send them an MP3, and you couldn't, they couldn't just go and check it out on, send it by phone.
Yeah. So they just when they sang on it, that was the first time they'd ever heard it.
Oh, hold on, can't do that. We seem to. I won't take this.
Is it your end?
Yeah, it's my end. Hold on. There we go. Sorry.
The bit that I remember was that seeing a tiny bit of it was when everybody sang their lines. And it reminded me of a penalty shootout where everybody's got to take a shot for the team. And the team are desperately willing them to succeed. And they've only got their one line of it. Paul Young, I think, went first. I can't remember now. And everyone's just going, and Boy George, with his red hair or what it was.
But you imagine how petrifying that was for any of them, because not only had a lot of them not met each other, and they would have been in competition. They're all fighting for the same chart position and the same kind of fan base.
And all say horrible things about each other in the press quite recently too.
Yeah, seemingly I apologised instantly to George Michael and said something like, "Do you want to hit me now or later?" Because I'd said something in the paper. Pathetic. But can you imagine how petrifying it is to walk in on a Sunday morning, hungover, grumpy, sore throat, having travelled in from Germany or whatever, and step up to a microphone in front of all your peers and sing a song or sing a line of a song that you'd never heard before in your life with a camera in your face. And you guys jotting down every word.
Absolutely.
It's that's scary stuff. That's what nightmares are made of. But they all did it. They all did it brilliantly. And I didn't see. I mean, I was stuck at the mixing desk for the entire period. I didn't really get to do anything other. My task was to get this thing finished and in the pressing plants by 8 o'clock the next morning. So I didn't see any shenanigans. There might well have been, but it all seemed incredibly good-natured to me.
Yeah. So tell us about when I'm interested in this, operating as a musical director, which you say you've done a few times. What does that involve? You talk about something where they bring in loads of musicians from different places and you've got to make it happen somehow.
Well, initially it involves being stupid enough to say, yes, I'll do that. Because when they asked me originally, it was, the first one I did was at the Prince's Trust rock concert, and they said, would you be a musical director? Because you seem to be the guy to do it. You've got the right kind of, nature to do it. I think it's nothing to do with musicality. It's more your ability to chat to people. Yeah. And I said, well, who's in the band? And they told me, and it was petrifying. It was Phil Collins, and it was Elton John, and it was Clapton, and it was Martin Knopfler, and it was all of those guys. And you think, well, I can't teach them or guide them. But all it needs is somebody to kind of liaise with the individual artists and talk to them about what it is they want to do, because they're all musicians. And once they're in the rehearsal period, my job was to say, just turn up with your guitar. Don't bring your entourage. I don't want to see managers sitting around looking at their watches or taking telephone calls. This is a bunch of musicians getting into a big rehearsal room and sitting around playing some music. That's it. And that's what they stuck to. They all adhered to that, except one who will remain nameless, who turned up with a couple of big heavies, and the doors kind of went, kadoosh, and he walked in and he said, is my song ready yet? And I went, oh, okay. But other than that, everyone else is great. Tina Turner sitting in the audience seats in the stalls of the Wimbledon Theatre for hours while we sat there running all the songs, waiting for her turn to do it. A bit like Phil Collins, the day of the Band-Aid thing, sitting waiting for hours on his one day off. His head would pop up above the desk and say, "You ready for me yet, boss?" And I'd say, "No, in a couple of minutes." And they go, "Yeah, no problem."
Somebody put up the track of him playing the drum track on the Band-Aid single the other day on Twitter. It's fantastic.
Oh,
fantastic
brilliant!
track.
But he did 2 takes. He did, and he only did the second take because he thought he overplayed the first one.
Wonderful!
What a consummate musician! He listened to it and thought, "I'm doing too much."
Yeah.
How many musicians would say that? They'd be going, there's a space there. I could fill that. I could just put something else in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you find that's more the case nowadays, where I hate to harp on your considerable experience, Midge. We were talking about remembering car days, but you've seen recording go from tape to digital and so forth. And it always strikes me, whenever, on the rare occasions I'm in a studio nowadays, when I go in, it seems that recording has become like a visual thing, whereas it didn't used to be, because now people are looking at meters and I can see the gaps on a track. Even I can see them.
So if you can see the gaps, isn't there a temptation to want to fill them? That must be part of it?
Well, I think you don't fill them, you just colour them in.
Right.
It's because you're right. You're looking at a map. You're looking at a jigsaw puzzle. You're looking at a screen. Which you never used to do before. You used to look at the mixing desk or whatever. Yeah. So now you're looking at a screen, and it's infinitely malleable. So you can look at something and go, you know what, I've finished that, but it would be so much better if I took the middle and put it at the front, and you can just pick it up and do that. Whereas on tape, you have to have the arrangement in your head, start to finish. Because if you want to change anything in the middle of the recording process, you would have to cut the tape, which we've done on a few occasions, but it's not a feasible thing, because once it's in, it's fixed, which used to make recording with Ultravox an absolute nightmare, because we had, if you're doing something, and I won't get too technical about it, if you're doing something that involves synthesized bass and acoustic drums, you can't, there was no way of linking those things together. So you had to play the synthesized bass live with the drums live. And if you made a mistake, you have to go all the way back to the beginning and do it again. So if you've got a running bass, and you make a mistake, none of that dropping in lark, because there's nothing.
And you couldn't loop it then? You couldn't just repeat it?
No, because it was being played. It was changing a lot all the way through the song. So you had to have the arrangement there. You had to remember the arrangement, start, middle, beginning, choruses, links, all of that stuff, bridges, and be able to play it. That's the difference between analog and digital. But yes, it's the same kind of process. The thing that really strikes me is that sonically, the music that as to a listener hasn't really changed that much since George Martin insisted that EMI buy a 3-track recording machine so that you could end up with a stereo picture. So it's still drums and guitars and vocals and keyboards and pianos, all still basically sound the same. So it's kind of like the technology has rocketed, but the process and the sounds that we use haven't changed that much. Sound manipulation has changed a lot. You can record, you can take a sound and you can, after the recording, you can go back in and completely change it. You can do multiple remixes. Whereas in the day, if you wanted to do a 12-inch mix of something, once you had finished the album track or the single or whatever you were doing, that was when you did your 12-inch mix, because once you broke the desk down, you had to start from scratch to get it all back up again. And you used to record sections of music and stick them all together. So a bit with just the guitar, drums and bass, and then drop the drums out, and then drop the bass out, and then do and do all of this stuff and chop it into sections, a bit like dub, the dub DJs in Jamaica or whatever.
Do you think there's an appreciable difference between records that are made when all the musicians are playing live in the same room at the same time and ones that are pieced together by technology? I can remember someone telling me that when they used to put on the Buena Vista Social Club record in the local All Bar One around the corner from here, that people would walk in sometimes and look around expecting almost to see a band playing because they almost subconsciously felt that it sounded different.
It doesn't happen very often, I don't think. I think the demise of the big recording studio, possibly part of it. The demise of being able to afford the ones that are left, is gone. So the record label advances for stuff that would be able to cover the costs of getting 8 musicians in a room for a week or whatever, and record things in live takes, and maybe the musicianship as well has kind of changed somewhat. It doesn't seem to. I don't know, warrant the same kind of accolade as it used to. It's been a long time since we've thought about a new band coming along going, wow, he's the best guitarist I've ever heard, or we don't get those polls anymore, number one drummer of the UK, in new bands. It's always the same people. It's a bit like when people say, will Live Aid ever happen again? And you think, well, who would you get? You get the same people who did it the last time. You get Elton John, and you get, whoever, the Who, and that's Pink Floyd. That's kind of what you get. It doesn't really change an awful lot.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to doing most when this bloody war is over, Midge?
And I'm glad you called it a war, because I keep trying to describe it as that. If this is our war, we've had a generation who's never had to go out and do man-to-man combat the way they did in First and Second World War,
which is a good thing. Let's be clear about that. Absolutely. We certainly wouldn't be sitting here having this chat if that were the case. Right now, if it kicked off now, we'd all be exempt, of course. We would be a comedy moment for the troops.
You'd be with a touring party. That's right. It ain't half hot, Mum.
Ain't half hot, Mum. That's it.
I can just see this Midge Ure, musical director for ENSA touring parties.
Listen, I this is the longest I've been static since I was 18. Since I left my apprenticeship and joined my first full-time band, and because I'm constantly touring.
Oh, really?
And it's something that's just, I don't know if it's inherent in every musician, but we're troubadours. That's what we are. That's what we do. We're not happy unless we're looking forward to what's happening tomorrow night or next week or whatever. And I've been doing my little broadcast things from here and chatting to a lot of my contemporaries, a lot of my mates, and asking them what they're doing. And they're all doing the exact same as me. They're all sitting on a pile of half-finished ideas, because there is no desire to finish it. There is no reason to finish it. We all have empty diaries. So for me, getting out and performing again is what I do and what I probably do best. And it's the old adage, the grass is always greener. When you're out on tour, you're fed up playing the same old stuff, every night, and you think, I'm desperate to get back into the studio to do something new. And then, of course, when you've been in the studio for a month or so, you're desperate to get back out and play. So we're never happy. What can I tell you?
It's interesting, that point about you don't feel like finishing anything, because I suppose when you finish something, you want to play it to somebody who then says, oh, we're going to put it out in 3 weeks' time or whatever.
You're going to go out and perform it.
Something's going to happen. Whereas
and that's not going to happen yet. So maybe there'll be a mad flurry of activity, 3 months before the tour's meant to happen in 2022, that I'll feel the desire to get everything tied up in a nice big pink ribbon and done and dusted. But right now, I just don't feel that. I'm quite enjoying doing the oddities that I'm doing. I'm experimenting a bit in the studio. I'm doing a bit of I'm hosting a show on Scala Radio. There's a lot of things that are going on that normally wouldn't have gone on, and it's that weird human element that we all have, where in a busy life we've all said, God, wouldn't it be great if we had some time on our hands to go and do something else? Well, now we've got more time in our hands we know what to do with, and we're not allowed to do anything. So we have to kind of create our own little new toys to play with.
I think it'd be interesting to see when live music comes back, whether when you turn up as a member of the audience, the artist will look clearly pleased to see you. No, seriously, because the kind of the way it works traditionally is the audience are really pleased to see you, and they're the ones who are supposed to be celebrating. Whereas with this, it might turn out to be the other way around.
I think it's possibly quite
people leaping off stage and hugging members of the front row.
That's right.
They'll be greeting them coming in the door.
Absolutely.
I'm Midge, I'm your entertainment.
Individually, that's right.
Well, we were joking about Van Morrison, because Van Morrison did some shows, didn't he? I think he did a show at the Electric Ballroom in London. And
we were saying, surely this is the moment when Van Morrison suddenly breaks out in a shout. Good, we're back, we're live, we're in the same. But apparently not, was it? Apparently it was still the same old grumpy cantankerous back to the audience.
Van singing "The Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow."
Yeah. I know.
Oh God!
I think the odd thing for the audience will be seeing the artists all covered in plasters and black eyes and stuff, because all the artists will have been having fisticuffs in the street trying to get into the venue to play it, because we're all desperate to get out and play.
Absolutely.
There's going to be a glut. Everybody you've ever thought you'd never see again will be out.
Every band will reform. That's right. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, nobody will leave it for next year, will they? No. So Midge, traditional, we finish these chats by asking people to tell us what is the greatest record ever made.
Oh,
is that something you've thought about?
I have.
Good.
And for me, although this is a re-release, it's got to be a record that changed everything for you. Whether you're a musician or not, we all have moments. It's a wonderful thing about music, is that when you haven't heard something for a while and it pops on the radio, or you just happen to hear it in a bar or whatever, it instantly transports you back to who and where you were and who you wanted to be and who you wanted to hang out with and all of that. And this album for me was a seismic moment. I was fortunate enough to see the artist perform this live just as they were starting to become huge. And it's this.
Oh yes,
of course.
Terrific.
I consider it to be one of the best albums of all time. Not just because it opened your eyes to something slightly bizarre and androgynous and whatever, but I think the songwriting at the time was great. It was just like all artists, you have a moment where everything just gels, everything comes together, and to me it was the perfect band. They all had their own identifiable elements that they put together in the music. Woody Woodmansey's style of drumming. Ronson's piano and guitar playing was exceptional. I still consider Ronson one of the most tasteful musicians that I ever came across. And Bowie's writing, it was just a brilliantly put together brilliantly produced record, very simplistic in its way, but it just stands the test of time for me. It's
Do you remember the Starman Top of the Pops moment that everyone always? Because I can still remember that.
With Ronson putting his arm around, vice versa, and singing through the same mic. Outrageous stuff it was in Glasgow.
It's interesting that something I was going to ask you earlier, actually, but Ziggy Stardust is a really good example of this. But I've been told this by more than one person, and I'd be interested in your view that he'd made that whole record, and they played it to RCA, and they said it's really good, we like it, but it needs a single. So he went away and wrote Starman, which was the single, sure enough. And there have been loads of cases of something similar happening, of bands making an album.
Yeah.
And once they feel they made the album, if the record company says, I'll tell you what, though, it needs a single, they're quite happy to make the single once they've made the album. Have you found that at any stage?
I've never done it. It's never happened to me, although I can see it happening quite easily. I think there's a thing about, I can liken that to, remember the old John Peel BBC sessions? Yeah. You used to go to Maida Vale, and you get a band in, and they'd knock off 4 tracks in 3 or 4 hours or something, just live versions of whatever the current recording was. 9 times out of 10, those knocked together recordings at Maida Vale sounded better than the original recordings. And it's because, as you say, the album's done. You have done the hard work. You've
pressure's
started this thing. You've made it. The pressure's off, and all of a sudden you go out and play it, and you're playing it better than the record, the one that you were worrying about.
And
it is a mindset. I think there's a mindset there that says, what you want? You want another track? I can knock out another track because the groundwork has been done. You've built the foundation. You're just putting an extra floor on the high rise. Well, that's a good analogy, isn't it? No, rubbish.
It's good. It works.
Rubbish.
You put a penthouse on the high rise.
It's an extension. Yes.
Midge, it's been a delight talking to you. Very nice to talk to you.
Thank you for asking me. Although it took you such a long time, I won't hold it against you.
We'll be back for the 200th during lockdown in the next year. No, it won't happen. It won't happen. Midge, it's been lovely talking to you.
Great to see you.
All the very best.
Thank you.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.